The name of Ghana originates from an African empire located around River Niger. The period between 15th and 19th centuries witnessed a power struggle for country among European nations for fortunes in gold, following the advent of the Portuguese who discovered gold in 1471 and bought Elmina Castle a year after. The other Europeans are and the battle for cultural art supremacy over the land culminated in the building of many forts and castles, which were used not only as the trading posts but also as dungeons for the infamous slave trade. There are 33 forts and castles in Ghana. Ghana, formerly called the Gold Coast, became independent from British colonial rule on 6 March 1957, and it was the first black African colony to achieve independence. The history of Ghana currency started its cowrie shell before controlled by the British Empire. After independence, the Bank of Ghana issued its own currency in the form of Ghana pounds, shilling, and pence on 1958. 7 years after, cedi notes and pesewa coins were introduced after leaving the British colonial monetary system. And in 1967, Kwame Nkrumah introduced the new cedi after military coup. However, it lived until 1973 and currency back to initial cedi and pesewa. Then, the top 3 exports of Ghana are coal, mineral fuels, and cacao. Meanwhile, the imports are motor vehicles, machinery, and electrical.
The first factor that affects exchange rate in Ghana is inflation. Empirical studies such as Still Maganti and Terentian 2015 and Enduri 2013 confirm a positive relationship between inflation and exchange rate. Thus, an increase in price may come as a result of rise in demand in both the tradable and non-tradable sector, which can cause exchange rate to appreciate. The inflation rate for consumer price in Ghana moved over the past 30 years between 4.87% and 59.46%. For 2021, an inflation rate of 9.97% was calculated. During the observation period from 1992 to 2021, the average inflation rate was 18.85% per year. The second factor is GDP growth. We can also see from the plot, GDP has been increasing since 1992, some years and Nordus 2000. GDP empower policymakers and National Bank to judge whether the economy is contracting or extending, whether it needs a help or limitation. According to some theories, there is a positive relationship between GDP growth rate and exchange rate. Some of exchange rate determination theory, such as monetary approach to exchange rate, predict that higher growth rate in a country leads to an appreciation of this country's currency. Hence, improvement in Ghana economic performance can be said to have positive implication on GCD. Third is government expenditure. Following from the Keynesian proposition, we expect government spending to boost economic growth by rising aggregate demand. However, higher government expenditure could also negatively affect growth because of crowding out effect of private investment, especially when expenditure is heavily financed with taxes. The lagged cedi dollar rates and government expenditure also contain useful information in forecasting the cedi dollar rate. In other words, cedi dollar rates and government expenditure grandeur the cedi dollar rate. Lastly is trade openness. Yannick Kaya 2003 and Dollars and Cry 2004 found a positive impact of trade openness on economic growth, especially in developing countries, using panel data analysis. For the indicator, we provide data for Ghana from 1992 to 2021. There have been fluctuations as well as in this factor. As shown in the graph, it hits its peaks in 2000, as export were on the rise and fluctuated since then, and the lowest percentage was recorded in 2020. The average value for Ghana in that period was 75.64%. It can be said that although there has been a major fluctuation in the trade openness, it has been a stable economy.
Then we proceed to the next part, which is distributive statistic. This table will illustrate the analysis in the study. Each variable has 30 sets of data, which represent the annual data for 30 years starting from 1992 until 2021. Based on the statistic on the determinant of the exchange rate, the table shows the highest value of the minimum and maximum is trade openness. Meanwhile, the lowest value of minimum and maximum is the exchange rate. The highest mean is trade openness, which is 75.64098880. Meanwhile, the lowest mean is local currency per US dollar, which is 1.768425340. Then for the standard deviation, the highest standard deviation is 18.2225150 from trade openness. Meanwhile, the lowest standard deviation is 0.9422753053, which is from the government expenditure. Next, I will explain the correlations. Correlation analysis is applied in quantifying the association between two continuous variables, for example, a dependent and independent variable. The value of the correlation of the gross domestic product and government expenditure is related to the exchange rate, which is value is 0.883 and 0.879 respectively. It is considered a positive correlation. We can explain that if the gross domestic product and government expenditures increase, the exchange rate will also increase. Next, the value for inflation is negative 0.437. Meanwhile, the value for trade openness is negative 0.321. Thus, both of the factors show a negative correlation with the exchange rate. We can conclude that if inflation and trade openness increase, the exchange rate will be decreased. We move on to the next part, which is multiplier regression. As for the model summary, the value for R squared is 0.819. This means that approximately 81.9% of the exchange rate of Ghanaian cedi is explained by trade openness, government expenditure, inflation, and gross domestic product. For adjusted R squared, the value is equal to 0.790. It shows that 79% of the variation of exchange rate variability. The dependent variable is mostly explained by the independent variable. For the coefficients, the value of this statistic is suggesting that gross domestic product, government expenditure, and inflation have a positive significant impact on the exchange rate, thus rejecting the null hypothesis and accepting the alternative hypothesis, while trade openness has an insignificant effect on the exchange rate and the null hypothesis is accepted. Finally, for ANOVA, the p-value for the f-test is less than 0.001. The value is less than the level of significance 0.05. So, the null hypothesis is rejected. This means that trade openness, government expenditure, inflation, and gross domestic product are statistically significant variables in explaining the variation in the exchange rate of the Ghanaian cedi.
In conclusion, the studies analyzed the factor affecting the exchange rate of the Ghanaian cedi and has been examined. The factor that actually affects the exchange rate is the trade openness, government expenditure, inflation, and gross domestic product. It can be proven by multiple regression and correlation analysis. The multiple regression have shown that government expenditure, inflation, and gross domestic product have a positive significant impact with the exchange rate, while trade openness has an insignificant effect on the exchange rate. Moreover, the correlation analysis shows the gross domestic product and government expenditure have a positive correlation with the exchange rate, while inflation and trade openness have a negative correlation with the exchange rate.